Welcome, Telltellers. This is part 3 of I Wish My Guardian Chose Someone Else by NotReady2Adult. This one is a mega episode. There is a lot going on. And it was raining a lot. And I have my daily deadline. So, if the quality is a little weird, I had to do some fancy footwork to cut out the rain from the audio. But I managed to finish it off, and I've got this one ready for you today. That aside, time for shoutouts. Troy Shaw, you awesome guy. Thank you for ongoing support, the likes, the comments, everything. Cheers, mate. The Mastercraft, also known as Jace York. Thank you for your support and the story you sent through. I'll have that in the works shortly. Oventon Quay, Many X Chaser, M. Wantel, Cheese Taken Corey, that's a great name. All Diddy, cheers mate, thanks for the reposts, I appreciate that. The Bro Runs podcast, and lastly, the Crazy Town podcast, which I highly recommend you check out. They cover some funny and weird stuff. Now, Telltellers, you know what time it is. Time to turn the lights off, the sound up, and get ready for something different. Between the ages from 13 and 16, Mother and I moved 3 times, each to a different state. Somehow, the deaths in my life and the attack on Skylar kept getting found out, and then we would both become social oddities, stared at by neighbours and whispered about behind closed doors. With each new school I attended, the whispering and bullying became worse before the secret would even be discovered. Simply because I had moved so often, the other assumed I had some dark secret. Perhaps that was precisely the problem. If a child is forced to move so many times in just 16 years, is quiet and shy, and goes out of their way to avoid interaction with people, it is probably no surprise that she's considered abnormal. I couldn't help it though. After that horrible accident with Skylar, I avoided others as if they had some unseen virus, scared to even touch someone else for fear of what wrath might do. After a year of unbearable medication and all but imprisonment in my own home, I couldn't bear the thought of it all happening again. Of someone getting hurt. Again. And then all of my freedom stolen away. I guess that's a bit selfish of me. After all, I should care more that 2 people are dead and another permanently scarred because of wrath. I do care, but not as much as I care about the punishments that follow wrath's anger. To be trapped inside my own mind, force-fed pill after pill, and then told by everyone around me that I was evil, a murderer and just too sick to know it. It has instilled a much greater fear in me. The fear of my life stolen away before I even get the chance to live it. Wrath left me alone during that time, although I suspect it was only because I worked so hard to avoid anyone touching me. My antisocial behaviour worked in my favour the majority of the time. As most people are happy to leave the quiet new girl alone if she puts on heavy goth makeup and pierces her ears with safety pins. I'll admit it, I went through an interesting, if not cliche time of my life during those years. I'm not totally out of it now at 18, but then I looked like every other goth scene kid from the 90s. Although that was a bit before my time. I just wanted to be as far removed from the normal kids as possible, and I outright refused any opportunity to make friends or even speak with others. If the teachers called on me during class, I answered the question as well as I could and as quickly as I could before disappearing behind my books again. If a classmate attempted to speak to me, I ignored them until they went away. In nearly every school I attended, the other Gothic and scene students wanted to bring me into their group, but they would always quickly drop it when it became clear I didn't want to be one of them. For some reason, they seemed to take it the worst whenever this happened, often being the first to start rumors or attempt to dig up my hidden and shameful past. Once it came out, Mother and I would move again, running as far away from the truth as we could. Mother was a registered nurse, and that meant she could pretty much find work wherever she went. Although, she would sometimes be forced to take a pay cut to ensure she got a job next to home. After all, she never knew when the next incident might occur, and she became increasingly protective until she all but became my personal warden at home. We talked about my homeschooling, but that was difficult with how much she had to work for us to get the bills paid. I couldn't risk working because I couldn't stand the thought of one angry customer ending up dead on the floor and the cycle starting all over again. I knew Mother didn't blame me directly for the many problems we faced. But it was becoming increasingly evident by the way the love in her eyes had dimmed since Scarlett's injury that she was beginning to become resentful. I think by the time I turned 15, she began helping me out of some sense of motherly duty more than any type of adoration, and I couldn't blame her. After all, her life was in shambles because of Wrath, and although she was finally free from my father, she shared this prison built by Wrath alongside me. Perhaps that's why she didn't say anything whenever she walked in on me cutting my leg for the first time. I started cutting at 14, first as a test to see if Wrath would appear to punish me, and then to maintain some sort of control over my life. Interactions with people that I couldn't avoid, like accidentally brushing fingers with the teacher as I turned in homework or bumping into strangers on the street, would send my heart and my mind racing, and I would need to find a safe place to cut into myself. It started with my arms, but those cuts were quickly discovered at school and led to too much attention, and so I quickly moved onto my legs. By my 16th birthday, my legs were covered in hundreds of interlapping scars, newly formed scabs, and many cuts nearly done healing. By then, it was nearly a mindless routine to take the blade to myself, and perhaps it had become an obsession. 2 days before my 16th birthday, I had been at the new school for longer than many of the others. It was nearly the 1-year anniversary of my arrival, and I had successfully stayed off the radar of everyone there. No teachers bothered to call on me anymore, students would part ways almost without thinking to let me by, and I felt that perhaps I could scrape out some sort of existence here, without any more problems with Wrath. Stupid, stupid me. One day, so close to my birthday, the secret finally came out. The moment I arrived at school and noticed more than a dozen pair of judgmental eyes turn in my direction, I knew that the cat was out of the bag, and that I would have to go home later that afternoon to tell Mother the bad news. She would be devastated, having just been promoted after nearly a year of hard work establishing a good reputation at her job. I took in a deep breath and forced myself to continue onward into the school, keeping my head low as I felt their gazes burn into my back. Murderer. The whispers could have come from anyone, but the hushed sniggering and murmurs that followed nearly sent me running for my life. I hated that part, the whispers. It meant I had been noticed, that someone knew who I was, and that meant there was a chance Wrath would come calling. I hurried to class, desperate to sit in my isolated corner desk and have the school day go by quickly. I don't know how I did it, but I managed to go through the entire day without having too much trouble. Although the whispers and eyes followed me everywhere, no one tried to talk to me or came up to start trouble. I started to think perhaps it would blow over without anyone getting hurt. And so, when I got home that evening and greeted my mother, I did not tell her the secret was out. I justified that it wasn't a big deal so long as the others maintained their distance and only whispered and watched. Mother and I were once so close, so happy to laugh and spend time together after the death of my father. Even during the months following Scarlett's attack, we'd remain very much a loving mother and daughter. But the year of medication took its toll on our once great relationship, and now we barely acknowledge the other's presence when in the same room together. I went to bed that night, hoping and praying to whatever God might be up there, that the whispers would be gone when I arrived at school the next day. It was Friday, which meant I only had to survive 7 more hours of school before I go home, and then spend 2 whole days away from interaction. Of course, the whispers were worse the next day, and this time, someone tried to talk to me. His name was Thomas, and as if he'd walked right out of one of those pandering, ridiculous movies, he was the school quarterback and a nuisance. He truly seemed to believe that others worshipped the ground he walked on, and some people actually did, because the tiny Texas town we lived in only had football to break up the usual routine of life. He came right up to me during lunch period where I sat alone for the last year, and stood over me for several long minutes, while I desperately tried to keep my eyes on my mashed potatoes. So, you're gonna say hello, or what? I remained silent, just as I always did, and kept my head down. Thomas shifted from foot to foot, and then sat down across from me, thunking his tray down so hard his mashed potatoes splattered onto the table. Look, I'm not here for charity. We're having a party tomorrow, and we know all about your fucked up reasons for moving here. We want to get the story from the murderer's mouth. So you'll be coming to that party, and you'll be telling us a little ghost story, okay? Great. It's at my house, and everyone knows where that's at. Come at 9. After speaking more words to me in a row than I'd heard anyone say to me in 3 years, he got up and left. Of course, I did know where he lived because he lived in the only house in our tiny town that was brand new, built by his business owner, father. I sat there shaking, terrified of the thought of going, much less telling my story, and it was already very clear to me that I would be locking my doors and windows at night and losing the key. School ended, and when I came home, Mother wasn't in. Yet. I figured I had no choice by then, and I would have to tell her the truth. That night I packed my very few belongings and waited for her to come home. But at 3 a.m, she still hadn't arrived, and I had fallen asleep. The next morning she was still gone, but a note was on the fridge saying she'd be in late and left early for work. I contemplated calling her, but then shook my head and thought better of it. I would tell her in person whenever she got home, and then we would be long gone before the party tonight. Except, she never did walk through the door, and 9 p.m. eventually came around. Just as I promised the day before, I checked and double-checked that all my windows and doors were locked before turning off all the lights and laying down. At 11 p.m, I thought the coast was clear and began to let myself drift off. Then a heavy thump woke me with a start. It came from my window, and when I looked up, Thomas's sneering face was peering down at me through it, with moonlight shining behind his dark black hair. He looked like a demon coming to steal me away. And what's with that shit-eating grin spread across his face? He lifted his fist and gave the window another hard strike, making me jump. You didn't show. We want to know the story, murderer. A chorus of male voices agreed from out of sight, and my stomach dropped. Had he brought the entire football team? I shook my head and leapt out of the bed, desperate to get to our tiny bathroom where I knew there were no windows for him to peek inside and lock the door. Just as I shut the bathroom door and turned the lock, the sound of smashing glass and howling laughter broke the air. They were obviously very drunk, and they weren't taking no for an answer. I fell back from the bathroom door and retreated to the bathtub, furious that I'd left my emergency phone on the bedside table charging. After the broken glass came the sound of many heavy feet hitting the floor and much cursing and laughing. The boys were climbing through the window one at a time, Thomas in the lead. And I held my breath in the dark of my prison. I should have run out the front door before they got inside. I should have grabbed a kitchen knife. I should have done anything but lock myself inside a room without an escape route. Of course, they found me in minutes, and Thomas called my name through the door.
Molly. We just want to hear the story. Molly, come on out, emo girl.
A shoulder struck the door, shaking it on its hinges, and I screamed. My terror was met with more howling laughter as another strike sent a long crack down the middle of the wooden surface. Another hard thump, and the door split in two down the middle, with Thomas all but falling on his face through it. I cowered in the corner, sobbing and begging them to go away. But Thomas found his feet and towered over me. He reached out a large, heavy hand and caught a fistful of my hair. And then he dragged me by my hair into the dark living room. Someone turned on the light and my stomach dropped as I saw 4 other boys waiting for me there.
Tell us the story, Molly. We want to know what it's like to murder your father.
Thomas kept his grip on my hair as he demanded I speak, using it to lift me up and present me to the others. I held my tongue, desperate to give them no sounds, but my pain gasping, and tried to pry his hands off. He shook my head hard, until I let go and stopped fighting, and I felt as if he might scalp me if he didn't let go soon.
Molly, he drawled, tell us what we want to know and we'll be out of your hair. Get it? Hair?
The others joined in, a couple so visibly drunk they could barely stand. Hot tears fell from my face, but I refused to speak a word and simply went limp. Thomas growled and dropped me. But he followed right behind as I hit the floor and covered my small body up with his huge frame.
Tell me your secrets, or I'll have to punish you with all my friends here to help. You don't have any of those, do you? Do you want me to be friendly to you?
At this, he ran a hand up my thigh as I struggled in vain to get away. Flashbacks of the burglar sending me into a blind panic.
I can be very friendly, Molly.
Wrath came then. A pressure on my ears that I would feel guilty about being happy for much later. He wasted no time lifting Thomas off of me and throwing him across the room with such force that he didn't move again from where he landed in a heap. The others scrambled, cursing and screaming, but Wrath wasn't forgiving any of them. The nearest boy, a running back on the team, screamed as his stomach seemed to turn inside out on its own. His bowels ripped from his stomach. He gurgled and then fell, dead in moments, while the others shared his fate. One boy nearly made it out, but his head snapped around the wrong way just as he touched the front doorknob. This time, when Mother came home, she didn't bother fighting for me as the police took me away. I didn't blame her either. As they sat me down and took my statement, my eyes made contact with hers, and I saw nothing looking back. No hatred or love, just nothing. I think that was what finally broke me, and I told the police everything. I was with Mr. Darkley at the psychiatric hospital by the following morning. Nearly 16 and now classified as a dangerous threat to the world around me. I couldn't have agreed more. Just wow. This was one amazing story. Wrath certainly living up to its name. Stay tuned for our next episode, that's episode 4, where we will tie this awesome story off. And again, a big thank you to NotReady2Adult, who approved of me narrating their story. Thank you so much. Also, I have to ask, did you enjoy the episode? You did. Well, fantastic. Take 2 seconds to click that like button so that others can check out this episode and this channel. If you're on iTunes or any other platform for that matter, take some time to rate the channel. I appreciate any feedback you have, and thank you for listening. Well, tale-tellers, this is the place where stories live and you tale-tellers come to listen. Enjoy your day or night and join me every weekday for our creepy tradition. And, as always, till next time.